Story 36. My new wife had an affair and left me and now regrets it. I, 28 male, met my wife Joanne Jo, 28 female, in 2017 in one of the few warm-weather coastal states. We dated for a little over a year and got engaged. Jo planned for the wedding to be early in the summer of 2018, 3 months from when I proposed. I was a bit taken aback by the quick wedding, so I pushed her to move it to early 2019. I told her we needed to live together for a while because my parents would only support us if we had at least a full-year engagement. She was annoyed, but agreed when she saw that I was adamant about getting my parents' approval. She moved into my apartment shortly after the engagement, and we set about getting ourselves situated financially and socially ready for marriage. We both worked decent jobs, and I was going after a promotion at my company. I completed a few projects there, and the last one I handled by myself was under the oversight of my manager. Jo worked an office job doing operations duties for a medium-sized company, providing IT services to local businesses. Her company was popular and growing at a steady pace, signing new deals regularly. The first 6 months went smoothly with little concern. We hit some road bumps in the last 6 months as we got to know each other better, but it wasn't anything significant. For example, I wanted to make sure that we each had a personal bank account, plus a shared account that we'd use to pay bills and major expenses. We both agreed that half of our net salary would be deposited into the shared account, with the other half going to our personal accounts. The disagreement was that Jo kept making personal purchases using our shared account. Then I found that she would pick up lunch for her friends at work, and they would reimburse her using Venmo or other apps. My issue was that she used shared money and collected the payments into her personal account. This has been more than $1,000 in the last 6 months. When I pointed out the logic, she said, okay, she'd fix that. But she didn't move the money back to the shared account until I mentioned it again at the end of the month. She got huffy with me and said I was being silly since it's all our money. I pointed out that our personal accounts are personal, and that's why we had them. Not to belabor, but she did a lot of this by purchasing stuff for herself using the shared account. It didn't make a huge difference, but it was annoying that she kept doing it until I would finally comment to her about it. I traded in my car and got a new one more suited for a family than my 2-door muscle car. When I traded it in, I used that for a down payment on a new 4-door sedan that I liked and used my personal account to finance it. Since this was my car, I felt I should use my account. Jo was completely different, and she wanted to trade in her car and get one, financing it through our shared account since it would be for the family and any kids we had. I told her that was fine, but it felt like she was testing me. I'm not trying to be a jerk here. This is what we had agreed on. She seemed to be doing this dance to try and get as much stuff paid for by the shared account as she could. I probably wouldn't have said anything if this happened after our marriage. Our shared account was enough to pay rent, utilities, and food while quickly building our savings intended to purchase a house. When we reached that point, we had agreed to each contribute the same amount from our personal accounts to the down payment. Some of you probably wonder why I was adamant about doing our finances this way. My older brother had gotten married right out of high school to his multi-year girlfriend, and they had dumped everything into a single account. When they ended up divorced, he was always lamenting that their financials were tied together. His ex drained the account before he could get any money out, and he couldn't even pay the rent on time. By the time he stopped his direct deposit and got his own account, he was living with our parents, screaming that his ex had also blown up the credit cards. The disaster of his relationship was monumentally a crap show. Combining this with following my mom's advice was a great idea. Thus, we had a personal account, a shared account, and separate credit cards with only our own names on them. We did have one shared credit card that was only used to buy shared assets from online services, like the biggest online retailer, which starts with A. Aside from the financial stuff, I always defer to her when making decisions. She chose where we were going to dinner, what social plans we would attend, etc. I did all of the chores that she wanted me to take responsibility for, and to be honest, she divided them up pretty equally. I did all of my chores, and did many of hers if she didn't get to them. Fast forwarding, we work through our issues and settle into a solid routine. We have fun, exploring along the coast together and camping with friends. Jo is one of those girls with just the perfect body shape. She never had to do much to keep in shape. She was very into nutrition and diet. We also worked out at the local LA Fit multiple times weekly. Our wedding date arrives, and we tie the knot with both families in attendance. Jo is in her moment and is a stunning bride. We spend the first half of 2019 in newlywed bliss and return to our lives. Around late spring of that year, Jo starts getting a little distant, spending more and more time with her friends. Her work time, coupled with her new friend time, has started annoyingly impacting keeping up our home. I will work, come home, and do everything around the house. This goes on for a few months, and then, out of the blue, Jo doesn't come home one night. I sat around waiting for her until around 10 p.m., then checked her location on my phone to find her location wasn't available. We have always had our locations shared, so we didn't have to worry about each other. It's really convenient to just take a quick glance to see where each other is so we can plan dinner, when we need to be ready to take groceries out of the car, etc. Jo had once had a flat tire on her car, and I was able to drive right to her without her having to try and figure out where she was on the side of the freeway. There are no real dead zones since we live in a big city area. The fact that I can't see her location is upsetting, so I send her a text asking where she is. The message quickly gets marked as read, so I know her phone is on. This means she's intentionally turned off her location or blocked me from Find My Friends. I texted her again, asking why her location was off, and she immediately replied with a snarky comment that she was with friends, and I needed to stop spying on her. I didn't take the bait, finished the show I was watching, and then went to bed. Jo came home around 6 a.m. and went straight to the guest bathroom to shower. I got up and was waiting for her in the kitchen when she came out, startling her. She got all blustery and said that she had fallen asleep on her friend's couch. I had not said a word. She goes and changes clothes and leaves for work. I get ready and leave for my job, annoyed at Jo's behavior. This goes on to a lesser extent for another couple of weeks, and then Jo is out all night again. When I confront her at the door in the morning while she's trying to sneak in at 4 a.m., she starts screaming at me like I've done something wrong. I again take the high road since I'm not a big fan of yelling matches. But I tell her in a calm voice that if she stays out all night again, she can find a new place to live. Jo started calling me names and telling me I was lucky to have her in my life and that she could have done better. I left the bedroom, grabbed my keys, and told her that maybe she should. Then I leave her with her mouth hanging open. Later that day, when I was at work, I got an automated text message from our bank that the shared account had dropped below $1,000. I freaked out and checked the bank app. Sure enough, there was nothing left in the account. I called the bank and it was transferred to Jo's personal account. I called Jo's phone and she didn't answer. I texted her, asking what was happening with the bank transfer, and she didn't answer again. I knew something was wrong by this time, so I went home early. The door was unlocked and partially open when I got to the apartment. The apartment is completely empty, except for the stuff in my office, and some of the stuff I had left over from before we married. Jo packed up and took everything we had purchased to furnish our home. I sat there stunned until it wore off enough, allowing me to sort out what must have happened. I get a hold of our HR department since it's still during work hours and explain what's happening. My HR partner is a rock star. Within a few minutes, my auto deposit was set to go to my personal account. I was still a bit shocky, and my HR partner started giving me some advice, assuming the worst. I did things like letting the apartment management know that my wife had moved out unexpectedly and that I needed the locks changed. I called the bank and shut down the shared credit card, but there was a large amount on it, pending to a local moving company. The bank asked me if I wanted to dispute that charge, so I said yes. I didn't tell them that my wife had made the charge, so they rejected it. Technically, I didn't know anything about the charge, and my wife didn't let me know in any way that a moving company would be billing us. It was good enough for me to justify in my mind. I did a few other things to secure myself, like parking my car in our garage, usually where Jo parked. The apartment maintenance guys showed up and changed out the locks since they take unauthorized access seriously. The garage wasn't key-locked. It used a remote fob that was replaced and synced to the opener. My home was secure. I contacted my mom and dad to let them know that Jo had bailed and taken almost everything, including all the money from our shared account. My social media started blowing up since Jo had changed her status to single and made a post gaslighting me about how I was an impossible partner and that she had to get out of the relationship because I was a controlling jerk. I held off replying other than posting that I had come home to a cleaned-out bank account and house. Then, I posted a picture of the disaster that was left over. The caption simply said, "I'm about to be single again after my wife decides to sleep around." There was a flurry of messages with our friends, and everyone expressed shock since nobody had seen this coming. This all blew up when one of Joe's work friends asked if it had to do anything with that guy she was spending so much time with and posted a picture of them at a park, with a date of over a month prior. Talk about a crap show. Some of the names people were calling her were downright savage. Joe came back trying to defend herself with more lies, but the truth was already there for people to see. The person who posted the picture went off on Joe and said she thought it was interesting that he seemed to be around a lot. One of her college acquaintances commented, "Hey, isn't that your ex from college? The guy you dated before OP?" Other people at the place where she worked came forward to hold Joe accountable with information regarding their meeting up in the parking lot and where others had seen them after work at restaurants, etc. This went on for quite a while, and I just lost it. The more I looked at the picture, the more he looked familiar. I've seen him multiple times since Joe and I started dating. I asked to take some time off and let my boss know what happened. I had a lot of vacation, so he told me to take as much as I needed and let him know how things were going. My brother reached out and offered me the number of his divorce lawyer. I sat for hours, staring at the message he sent with her number. I took a few days to reset my brain and let my emotions run their course. The part that stuck more than anything was the sense of betrayal. I called the lawyer, scheduled an appointment, and started the process. The fact that Joe was cheating on me, taking all the home furnishings and emptying the shared account was going to paint a pretty ugly picture of her. The attorney's office handled getting her served. That cost me a bit of money, but I didn't have to deal with it. So I consider it well spent. Joe was served at work in her office by a sheriff's deputy. That didn't go over well at all for her. It seems her boss had already heard about her antics, and some angry coworkers had come to him with what she was saying about them on SM. Being served in the middle of a meeting with her boss and some company executives put her in a bad spot. Her boss was not amused, and she ended up getting let go. Skipping some of the stupid drama over the next 6 months, my divorce went pretty quickly once Joe's lawyer explained to her that she had done everything she could to make the divorce go in my favor, and that unless she wanted to be taken to the cleaners, she needed to be fair in the negotiations. It also helped that we hadn't even completed our first year of marriage. I just wanted out of the marriage and offered to split all assets equally, including the shared account that she had drained. My lawyer had the financial details of what Joe had taken, and I had gone through the shared credit card account and put a number of items on the list that were not shared. I also reviewed the receipts for all the furniture and stuff we'd purchased to furnish our home that Joe took when she left. I told my lawyer I wanted precisely half of the total added to the money she would give up. I didn't fight that I had put slightly more money into the account because I made a few thousand a year more than she did. I insisted that there be no alimony, and my lawyer said that with the length of my marriage and the facts around her behavior, there would be none. I'm sure that, in the end, Joe's attorney convinced her that this settlement was the cleanest way out for her. She agreed and signed the paperwork, which went into the system for processing. Since it wasn't being contested and we had no kids, I was told that it would only take a few more months. We finally got a date from our attorneys for the divorce to be finalized, and I looked forward to moving on. Joe and I had not spoken to each other in any fashion since the day she left me. About a month before the divorce was final, Joe reached out through some friends since I had blocked her on everything I could. She asked to see me in person to talk about us. I was confused since she went from being a total bish shark to wanting to meet with me to talk. I did some digging before responding and learned from one of our remaining shared friends that she was no longer with AP. I was told she started living with AP when she lost her job. They had burned through her money quickly, and she dared not touch the money her lawyer told her she'd need to return. Once she ran out of cash, she had to start looking for work. Being fired for cause seems to significantly reduce one's chances of finding new employment. Out of sheer curiosity, I agreed to meet with her in a public setting and had a friend follow me and video the entire encounter. Joe was so focused on me and the topic that she didn't even realize my friend was sitting one table away from us with his phone facing our table. Joe looked like crap. It had been about 5 months since I'd seen her, and she looked like it had been a rough 5 months. She was gaining weight, and her complexion was bad. That was very different from the Joe I knew. Her tight clothes may have accentuated some of her body in a way that guys liked, but she just looked like she wasn't taking care of herself. She had lost the look of an athlete. On the flip side, I had been using exercise as a way to decompress since it helped me with the stress of the divorce. I have to admit Joe was still the woman I loved, and I ached when I saw her. Her personality was back to the Joe I met and dated in 2017. She tried to keep things light by complimenting me and asking how I was doing. When I told her that I was fine and work was going well, she seemed happy for me. Then, there was an awkward pause where I thought she was waiting for me to return the compliment. And I didn't. She looked down at the table and visibly collected herself before looking back at me. She looked at my hand and commented that I was still wearing my wedding ring. I told her I would wear it until the last day we were married. She looked up at me and asked why. I told her that, unlike her, I loved my wife and would never do anything to hurt or shame her. Then I told her I had promised her my heart and would be faithful to her as long as we were married. The look of shame she had on her face warmed my heart. It's hard to admit that, but it's an honest feeling I had. She started to tear up as she looked at my ring and thought about what I said. She looked up into my eyes and said she was sorry that she wasn't the wife I deserved. I nodded and then asked her bluntly what she wanted to talk about. She took a moment to collect herself again, then asked me if I would be willing to pause the divorce and go to couples counseling. The shock must have been pretty evident because she just started telling me that she knew she messed up, that what she did was wrong, and that she never wanted to hurt me. It continued for a few minutes until she finally asked me to forgive her and give our relationship another chance even though she didn't deserve it. I sat there with my mind running a mile a minute, trying to just fathom the ridiculous idea of me ever taking Joe back. I wanted to laugh in her face but caught myself before actually doing it. I could see it in her eyes she was trying to read what I was thinking. I took a deep breath. I told her that I loved her, but I would never consider putting myself back into a relationship as toxic as the one she created. I had done everything to try and make her happy, and she had decided that I was her second choice. I told her that her decision was final in my mind. I wished her all the best in her life going forward, and that I would always have a special place in my heart for her, but I would never allow that feeling to rule me. I got up, thanked her for reaching out, and dropped enough cash on the table to cover both tabs. I nodded to my friend and said, "Let's go." It was the first time she realized I had brought someone to witness the conversation. She started crying as I walked away. Our divorce was finalized, and Joe looked the same as at the restaurant, except she had purchased some clothes that fit her figure better. When it was complete and we were walking out, Joe came to me and asked for a hug. I looked at her, held my hand before me, and symbolically took my wedding ring off my finger. It was the first and only time I'd taken it off since she put it on at our wedding. I offered her the ring, saying I wouldn't need it anymore. Joe broke down and cried again. I handed the ring to her lawyer and asked that he give it to her when she was ready, then left. I started dating about 6 months later with a shared friend. Her name is Amira, and she's Filipino by ancestry. She is extremely pretty and petite. She has a sharp wit and makes me laugh so hard that sometimes it's hard to breathe. We moved in together in late 2022 when COVID was starting to be a distant memory, and people were doing their best to pick up the pieces of their lives. Since we live in a state that wasn't super into stay at home at all cost, we have enjoyed dating and being together. It's now early 2024, and I saw Joe again just a few months ago. I was running in the park I used for my normal route when I noticed someone familiar walking towards me on the path. It was Joe. She hasn't been treating herself well since she looks like she's put on 30 to 40 pounds. Amira was running next to me, and she noticed too. She looked at me as we passed Joe and mouthed, "Is that Joe?" When I nodded, she just said, "Wow," and we kept running. Joe looked up at us running together, and I knew I saw the look of recognition in her eyes and the quick look away. She was dressed for exercise, so I hope she's trying to get back to a healthier lifestyle. I'm engaged and got that promotion I was looking for. Amira works full-time but wants kids and to be a stay-at-home mom. I'm totally on board with being a dad and having a loving wife waiting for me when I get home. I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.
fast forwarding it, we work through our issues. Settle into a solid routine. We have fun exploring together and camping with Joe. One of those girls with just the perfect body shape. She never had to do much to keep it. She was very into nutrition and diet. We also works out at the local LA Fit multiple times weekly.